really to showcase to all of you guys this other world of tech that's out there besides standard industry level jobs. All of the three women that we have today are wonderful. They're passionate about what they do, and I really hope you all can learn from what they have to offer. Um, Panelists, well, there will be like a sort of a formal introduction, or we could actually honestly just start that now. Severa, how does that sound?
Sure, whatever works for you.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so that was a little introduction about myself. Our first panelist is Tanvi. Tanvi, do you want to give a quick spiel of who you are, what you do, things like that?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Tanvi. I am a second-year PhD student in the computer science department. I do research in two things. The first being theoretical computer science. I may have TA'd you in one of the theory courses because I do that pretty often. And I also do research in human-computer interaction, and my main area of interest is fair algorithm design, which is why I look at both. So yeah, I did my undergrad at Carnegie Mellon not too long ago. So I still sort of feel like an undergraduate student. I did research back when I was an undergrad. I TA'd a lot when I was an undergrad, and I found that super fun. And yeah, it's basically pretty much it.
Awesome. Our next panelist is Megan. I think you're muted right now.
That would be about right. Hi, I'm Megan. I'm a second-year master's student in electrical engineering with any luck graduating this spring. Did my undergrad at Texas A&M in electrical engineering and mixed that in with some cybersecurity and computer science. And now I do research at the intersection of power and cybersecurity. So a lot of stuff around securing the grid and integrating renewable resources. And also looking at both of those things together. So looking at how new types of renewable resources and the controllers and the communication they have built in may open the grid up for new types of cyber attacks. And then of course, looking at how to defend against that.
Oh, awesome. The last but definitely not least, we have Patricia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Patricia Witter. I'm a UIUC alum, graduated in 1990, and I'm currently on teaching faculty at Washington University in St. Louis. And we are partly in person, partly online. So I've been teaching all day with masks on to a bunch of masked students. But happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm really glad that all three of you are here today. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. So if you guys want to put in grid view, I suggest it's a lot easier to see everyone, and like it's just easier to talk, I feel. But do as you will. So I do have some pre-questions to kick us off. And of course, all of the attendees here, you guys can ask questions at any point to our panelists. But I will just kick it off and say, how about each three of you, we can like alternate the order that we go. Just start off with, where did your passions for research or academia just stem from? Was there a single moment, a single project, a single person that really kickstarted your career?
I could go first. Yeah, so I would say my passion for research was mostly, it was partially like I started doing research in my undergrad. I was really lucky and started working with one of the graduate professors when I was a sophomore. I had written my first paper that year. But I still wasn't convinced that I wanted to do academia because like, why on earth would I choose that over, a job at Microsoft or Google? And then I went and worked in industry. I interned at Microsoft at Xbox and did not enjoy it. Like, I never thought that I would be someone who like just could not stand doing work they didn't like, even though like you get paid an exorbitant amount at these companies. But I just wasn't interested in the work, and I'm a fairly stubborn person. And so I was like, okay, I don't think industry is for me, at least not right now. And then I did research at a different university through an REU the next summer just to like solidify like, yeah, research is what I want to be doing for the next couple years. So I think that the culmination of those experiences is what led me to academia. That, and at my undergrad, a lot of the undergrads TA'd. So like all the core CS courses were TA'd by undergraduate students. I was a head TA, and I really enjoyed the experience of teaching. And so this idea of wanting to be a professor, or like the possibility of wanting to be a professor, I didn't want to close the door on that. So I figured going to grad school, because I could, was the option for me. All right, cool.
I feel like I came at it a slightly different way. I think the subject matters that I started getting interested in really pushed me towards research. I had a few experiences and internships in industry as well, and I didn't mind them so much. There were definitely some things about them that were kind of boring, kind of repetitive tasks, didn't really seem like you were doing anything new, particularly in the power industry. A lot of the stuff that we do is 50 years old or more. But the way that I got into power was a little bit unusual, I guess. There were scholarships available for people who were interested in power, and I applied to those, and I had to write essays about what was interesting to me or what was the most exciting problem in power that I thought there was. And so I did a little bit of research and decided that cybersecurity was the most interesting problem in power. And because of that, scholarship essays kind of got me connected with some professors, and started doing research that way, and really found some people that were doing this really interesting work that I had never imagined existed, especially in the world of power, which I had kind of thought was old and boring and dead. So seeing that, and then as I got into that more, it just seems like there was more and more specialized things to do, and I felt like to have the career that I wanted, to do the thing that I wanted, a graduate degree was going to serve me well or fast track me towards the type of positions that I was interested in, where I could use both the skills from the cybersecurity side and the power side, and that instead of having to work my way up through some of those more boring and repetitive jobs that I had seen in my internships, that having a graduate degree would allow me to go into the workforce saying, no, I'm experienced in this, I know what I'm doing in this, and these are the problems that I want to solve, and you need to solve them. So that's how I got into academia.
Yeah, I think we all come at it from a different angle. When I graduated with my undergrad, I had no intention of going to graduate school or being in academia. I went into industry. What I found was no matter where I was and what I was doing, I began teaching. I was working in a chemical plant, and within 6 months or so, I was asking if it'd be okay if I set up a training course for electricians on some of the things we were doing. And so they're like, sure. And so, so I did, and I started to, to teach a class to these, 60-year-old electricians about what we were doing. And I found that to be kind of something that I naturally gravitated towards. And so when I was home then for a while when the kids were born and was ready to go back into the workforce. I went back to graduate school then and basically never left the university. And so that's how I ended up as teaching faculty now. So.
I think it's so interesting that all three of you, by complete coincidence, have completely very different paths. And I think that just showcases how there really isn't any standard path to get to where you guys are in academia. And honestly, could change from here onwards as well. Like many of you guys said, I had no intention of doing this, yet you guys are all here today speaking. And I think that just says something very powerful. Also, quick thing to the attendees, you guys feel free to send a question on the chat or even unmute. Either way works, and me and Severa can be looking at the chat for any questions you guys have. At this time, are there any questions? Otherwise, I can ask my next one. Okay, I will take the silence as let's move on to the next. Oh, there is one from Claudia. How does research look like day to day?
For me, I guess I'm in a little bit of a unique position. I have two advisors, one in power and one in cybersecurity. So I work with two different groups on campus, but I don't really necessarily feel like I have a home lab like a lot of grad students do, where they're working with the same people on one project most of the day. So my day looks like splitting time between the two projects that I have on campus, and I also do part-time work for Idaho National Labs. So really there's three big research commitments, I guess, on top of classes that I take care of. And for me, I like planning things and scheduling them out. So I block off time for each of those in my week and try to make sure that I'm kind of giving the right amount of time to each one of my projects. Writing down my goals for the week or the things that need to get done, and working towards those. But it definitely is a lot of self-management. And for me, again, I find that just blocking off my calendar and telling myself what I need to do is helpful. But at the end of the day, it's very much up to me and how I want to do it.
I think that's a really good point that Megan makes. When you're working in research, it's not always clear what the next step should be, and you have to be ready to manage that and to set aside time to think, to set aside time to plan, and to make kind of your own work list of what you're going to do next. When you're in industry, it's usually pretty obvious what needs to happen. Not always, but it's usually pretty clear what your tasks are, what your day-to-day goals might be. We're in research, you're not really sure where the next step is going to take you. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, so my research day to day differs depending on what I'm working on. So in theoretical computer science, a lot of research is really just thinking about a problem, which is not the most satisfactory thing because like I feel like other disciplines, you program something and even if the code doesn't work, you have the code, like you have something to go back to. Whereas with theory, it's like I always make jokes that like with theoretical computer science research, you're just spending most of the time waiting around for like the math muses to come and visit you and like bless you with like the insight. But even like I think the other aspect of theoretical computer science research is finding the right problem, and I don't think people showcase how like important finding the right problem is. So for instance, for me, I've worked on projects where like we started with the right problem and we were able to do things with the problem and then have results that were worth publishing. And then I've spent the next 2 years like trying a problem and then realizing, this one's not going to give way anytime soon. So that's for theory research. For HCI research, it's sort of like going to a lab, although so far my lab is just online. So all of us gather in like a gather.town space and just work. And it varies. Like right now I'm looking at a new social media platform and trying to understand like the design affordances that platform has that can give way to moderation. The other students in my lab, they have a lot of data that's already been collected from some other projects. So they're spending their time trying to figure out what questions they can answer with the data they've accumulated. And so it's a lot of like all over the place work. It's not as clear cut as you have this problem and then you're going to work towards a solution. Sometimes you have a solution, you're just trying to find a good problem. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of diverse things. So that's nice.
Kind of going off of what all three of you guys said, how really there's no predictability. So in your path to academia and also while you're in academia, how do you guys know that you are attacking the right problem or you are addressing and like you are going in the correct direction if there even is one? Like how do you make sure you are on track to succeed in any which way?
I think that's a very, it's really insightful to even ask that because I think that sometimes you can't know, and that's not very, that doesn't give a lot of confidence. But I think you can feel like you're on the right track because of the response of the others around you. You're not operating all by yourself. You're operating within not only your own lab but in a community of people in the same kind of field, and by educating yourself about what's going on in your field, you can see what's kind of getting traction and what's being responded to and how they're responding to that. And, usually you can see it in the excitement of your mentor. It's like, oh, that's a publication. That's something new. That, and not everything is going to come to a neat, tidy solution either. Sometimes even eliminating, it's like, that, oh, this problem is not solved in this way that we thought. Well, that's still progress.
Yeah. The other thing was like, you asked like, how do you know you're still like on the path towards success? I think like at least for me, I've had to redefine what success meant because, like, I think the standard metric is the number of papers you output is how successful you are as a researcher. And the more you understand the research community and like just how broad all of our fields are, you realize like the machine learning community, like 50 papers come out of a lab every conference cycle. And that's insane to someone who's in like theoretical computer science or security, right? So like you have to adjust your metric. And I would just say like doing any kind of work that you feel yourself learning is what's making you successful, because even if you don't solve the problem you're working on, you know that you're in better shape to solve like whatever else you may encounter down the line. And that sounds super corny, but honestly, I think like that's at least how I think about it. And I think it's a good way to think about it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things for me has been measuring success by sort of the number of opportunities I get to do different things. And it could even be something like this panel where someone has thought that I might be a good person to talk to other people about my experiences. But even beyond that, getting tapped on the shoulder by a manager or by an advisor and saying, hey, can you take care of this part, or can you lead this part, or can you teach this person this new thing? All of those are signs that somebody else has seen something in you, and whether you feel entirely ready for the opportunity or not. Each time that you get asked to do some bigger thing or some bigger responsibility, that means that you've met some mile marker and that you're ready to move on to the next step.
Awesome. Are there any other questions from the audience members that you guys have? Oh, there was. So building off of that, in all of your careers so far, what part of research motivates you the most to keep going with your work? And are there any points where you feel stuck, and how do you regain inspiration? So how do you keep up with your momentum, basically?
And that's a really, really good question. One thing that I did not fully appreciate the value of is technical conferences, and whether that is a women in engineering conference, or the teaching of engineering conference, or I'm in biomedical engineering, so I go to Biomedical Engineering Society, which is a huge conference each year. There's always going to be some subgroup or angle or keynote or some kind of speaker. I really get energized by being around people who are striving for the same type of goals, and you can really get a lot of energy from seeing what other people are struggling with, seeing how they're succeeding. And that can be very local, or it can be very, in a very much larger community. But that's a really good way to find a new, fresh outlook and new energy to keep going.
I would 100% agree with that. I think almost any conference I've been to, whether I walk away with a new technical idea or not, I usually leave feeling excited about the the topic again if I wasn't before. And I think another part of that for me is just being able to sort of refocus and look at different parts of the project. So I think sometimes it's easy to kind of go down a rabbit hole and get a little bit tunnel visioned and feel like, this is the next thing that I have to accomplish, this thing. And if you get roadblocked there, it can be kind of frustrating. But if you remember that your research is trying to usually accomplish a wide set of goals, and consider different parts of that, I think it can be kind of energizing to turn to different parts of the project, maybe work with a teammate on something that they're doing, or learn a little bit more about a different part of the project that you're maybe not the lead on or not as familiar with, and getting that different perspective, contextualizing your research a little bit more, remembering why it matters, and who it serves, I think is invigorating.
Yeah. I've had similar experiences going to conferences. I will say though, sometimes I would say solid half of the time I'm at a conference, along with excitement, you get really overwhelmed because you're like, oh my God, there's so much. And I know nothing. And yeah, here I am. And so I think conferences, interacting with people in your community, interacting with the newer, I was about to say younger, but like just the newer people in the research community who sort of come in like all energized and ready to go, and sort of like borrowing the energy that they have is really nice. I will say that the second question was like, are there any points where you feel stuck and how do you regain inspiration? All the time, like more than I want to admit. I've gotten stuck. I've just been like disheartened because, you know, the math muses aren't there, or just like I'm tired because I'm a student, and like especially with the pandemic, that feeling has come back a lot. And I think like it's okay to be in certain phases in your like academic career, your research career, where you're kind of stuck and you're just going through the motions. I think that's actually very healthy. I think like a lot of the best researchers I know like go through that feeling, but they've learned to be comfortable with it, and just like if they're not, you know, energized to solve the problems, they're just like doing the due diligence they need to do to wait until the feeling passes. So yeah.
That's excellent point you brought up actually about the pandemic and how things aren't really just going the way we want them to go. Definitely very relevant right now in terms of even undergrad, I feel. But we can move on to the next question, or if there's any questions right now from any of the audience members.
Yeah, I had a question. I just wanted to know, since all of you have such different careers in research and academia, what is one thing that you, or one or a couple of things you didn't really realize or expect of a career in academia before you had sort of gone into it, that you may think would be beneficial to share with others interested?
So this is gonna, so I used to think that I don't want to word this in a way that's like doesn't come off as like, oh my God, I think everyone I've met in academia is dumb. But I think like when I was in undergrad, the level I thought grad students were at, I was like, there, I will never get there. It's not in my ability to. And then when you become a grad student, you sort of realize, at least for me, you realize like most of the people also don't really know what's going on. And because of that, it like, I just think I'm having a better time because I'm not super stressed about not knowing enough. And so I think that's one thing about academia that surprised me, was that like it really, like you really are a student. Like you're not going to grad school and just expected to be like a fully developed researcher. Like even if you had a research experience coming in, like I had 3 years of research experience going into grad school, and I still, you know, felt like, oh, there's so much more to learn. Like I'm nowhere near like a fully fledged researcher. So yeah, that was one surprising thing for me.
I think that's a really good point, Tamdi, is that, you know, the gap between who you are right now and who you might be as a graduate student, or even who you might be as a professor, if that's in your future. You know, you're still you, and it's still, you're still learning, and your professors are, you know, are students of the field as well as you are. And you know, I think one thing that surprised me a lot was not only that, but, you know, just recognizing what the goals are in academia compared to in industry. You know, because in industry, the goal that everyone is working towards, as we put it here, it's turning ideas into money, and in academia, it's turning money into ideas. And so it's kind of, which which approach are you most comfortable in? You know, is it um, and you know, when you switch from one to the other, when I went from industry into academia, it felt so slow at first, because like, oh my gosh, the pace is so different than being in industry. But when you realize it's not really the pace, it's the priority, it's the goals that you're working towards, and they just have a different timeline. And you know, that you can realize that you do have a place in that, and you can contribute to that.
I would agree with the comment about pace, and I would say that I probably haven't had as much experience to kind of see the inside to all of that. But one thing that surprised me, I guess, kind of along that track was just maybe how much effort goes into trying to get the money to do the research, and that it's a whole different process behind that. And really just as much of a pitch as is in industry, of trying to convince someone that your idea is good and worth investing in. It's just a little different in that it can kind of be an idea, and can you fund me so that I can explore this and see if it works the way that I expect it to, and advance the field in some way, even if I don't deliver one exact product, versus, here's my prototype. I need the money so that I can build 3,000 more of them and start selling them. And I think another thing that maybe surprised me a bit was just about the development of careers in academia. I don't know if that's quite the right way to say that, but even as 2 years in grad school, I've worked on a wider variety of projects than I expected to when I came in. Different opportunities have come up where I've been pushed into different things that have sort of given me broadening skills, things that I probably wouldn't have chosen for myself, but that have taught me something. And I think, I've seen professors and other grad students as well that maybe start in one area and decide that their interests have shifted, or that they weren't interested in that first area to begin with. It's just a starting point, and that they've been able to kind of change their research paths and their focus. And that was an encouraging thing to me, because I guess I thought, you see a professor and it says they're the expert in XYZ. And so they do XYZ and that's what they do. And I think that's less true than what I originally thought.
So you guys talked a lot about basically you think you're not up to that level of what it means to be in academia, but clearly you guys are there and you guys are at that level. So I think this goes hand in hand with the idea of imposter syndrome into the academia world. And many young minorities today are scared to get into academia because of these feelings of imposter syndrome. How did you guys overcome them? Like, I know you guys, or a few of you had them. How did you take that first leap to, like, I don't know, blank out the idea of imposter syndrome and just go for it? And I know it's a heavy question, so take your time if you need to.
So when I was an undergrad, everyone had imposter syndrome, to the point where like it was just a running joke between us. And like I made, the Supreme logo, I made stickers in the Supreme logo that just said imposter, and like handed them out. And there were at least like 100 kids in my major that had this sticker, because that's just how prevalent it was. And like I did my undergrad at Carnegie Mellon. So this was like Carnegie Mellon computer science. And so you have some of the brightest students. And then like, if you ask me back then, and somehow I got in, but you have all these students who like clearly are good at what they do and are good at learning, which is the most important thing. And they all feel like this. And so I remember in undergrad thinking like, okay, all the work I'm going to do is going to be in spite of the fact that I don't believe I deserve to be here. And that worked. Like I got through undergrad. And then when I got to grad school, I was admittedly burnt out for the first year. And I had this like it has to go back to the pandemic, because I also think feelings of imposter syndrome tied to like mental health. And I feel like our generation is very much like, let me self-deprecate, because those are the funniest jokes and those are the kinds of TikToks that get like the most views or whatever it may be. And I was like, hey, I'm just gonna be proud of the work that I've done, because like I put effort into it, and I should just not constantly sell myself short. And so I personally have just been working a lot on like trying not to, be self-deprecating, and to say what I've done out loud. And like, I used to do this in front of the students I TA'd too, and I would hate it, because I'd be like, oh my God, you sound like you're bragging. And it's like, no, you're literally just stating the work you do. And if it comes off as bragging, it's because it is impressive, and you should take ownership of that. But I think one thing that helped me a lot in undergrad was just knowing that like didn't matter how successful you were still feeling this way. And so then for me, I was like, okay, clearly this is an irrational feeling, and I should not pay any heed to it or put any weight on that thought. And like that thought can hang around, because like when I was an undergrad, I didn't have the time or the mental energy to sort of resolve that voice. But you just have to make sure it's not getting in your way, right? Like that's the biggest thing. Just do what you want to do and try for the things you want to try, and don't worry about how you think or like what you think you are. The other thing was I had a professor who he would like when I expressed these imposter syndrome-esque thoughts to him, and he was like, do you think you're that good at fooling people? Like come on, like you either have to be a sociopath or a mastermind or something of that nature to have fooled so many people. And then he gave me this like math proof of like, say there's a 50% chance you prove one or you fool one person. Okay, then there's a 25% chance you fooled two, and there's an even smaller percent chance you've proved three. And imagine how many people you've had to fool to come here. That number, the chance that you fooled all of them like goes to zero as the number of people increase. So mathematically, your imposter syndrome has no basis. And I personally love that last proof just because like math things make me happy, and like that's one I always keep around. So yeah.
I love that proof. That's awesome. I think for me, one thing that maybe helped me, or I mean, certainly did help me, was the fact that my mom was an engineer. And so it was never unusual to me growing up that women were engineers, or that they could have a career and family and do all of that. So I definitely benefited from that, but that's not to say that I didn't ever have imposter syndrome. I think the strongest was probably an internship, a couple of years of internships actually I had in the oil and gas industry. And, you know, working in a refinery, I was the only technical woman working on my floor. And it was the floor of electrical and mechanical engineers for the refinery. And I was an intern, and there was just things I had to do to make it feel like I belonged, or that people would recognize me as being the engineer. So I very rarely went out into the field, but I still wore my FRCs, my fire retardant clothing every day, because that's what all the other engineers wore. And I felt like if I didn't, I was going to be mistaken for a secretary. And I don't know if I've learned anything from that, or if I went back, if I would do it differently, because again, it just sort of seemed like that was the uniform for engineers. But I think there was a certain element to that was, you know, oh, because I'm female, if I don't do this, then I'm going to be mistaken for the secretary. And I think, yeah, I guess I don't know if I have a solution from that story in particular, other than just, I mean, I did it. I did the internship. I got recommendations from people. I worked on a variety of different projects that I was able to take. They invited me back for a second summer, and I worked in a different location. And, you know, I think sometimes just pushing through that and getting some of that validation. I try not to be the person that's striving for the grades and the validation and all of that, but just seeing that you can be successful and that people want to work with you, I think that's a big indicator. Less so than like a rank or a grade, but you know, if people want to work with you, then they believe that you have something to add to that project. And it's not because whatever other reason you think, you know, if they didn't want you to be there, you wouldn't be there. So I think that kind of goes back to what Tanvi was saying too with her professor. If they didn't want you there, you wouldn't be there. And we all are here, and that means we all deserve to be here.
It's kind of what I would say you have to discover for yourself, even as far back in elementary school and middle school, is that other people around you aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you're thinking about you. And they're worried that they're not fitting in. They're worried that they don't belong. And I think if we can remember that it's really just our dark brain telling us scary things in the middle of the night, that we can, we do belong. We do have a voice, and we do have something to bring to the table, and there's going to be moments that's very humbling, thinking about the pandemic very, very recently. I was preparing to teach a class in biomedical data science, and I was imagining myself starting this new course this semester, spring 2021. And we were working on it, talking about what the curriculum would be at the end of spring 2020. And then the pandemic hit, and they said, oh, we need summer classes. We have to have a bunch of summer classes for our students because they are losing their internships and we need them to have something useful to do and get some courses in. We don't typically offer a lot of summer classes here. And like, Patricia, can you teach your data science class now? Start in 3 weeks. Well, I wasn't ready, but but I did it. And there were definitely times when I was only this much ahead of the students in what I was prepared to teach and what I was ready to, to share. But you can do it. And I couldn't decide whether I wanted to reveal that to the students. And in the end, I did, and I think that was a good lesson for all of us. It's like, you don't have to, hide that if you don't know. If you are just learning, if you are unsure, you don't have to hide it. You can leverage the group and the community of knowledge to bring everyone forward.
That's all really great advice. That proof is something, Tanvi, I'm never going to forget myself.
I have many just like that one.
We would love to hear. Are there any questions right now from audience members?
I can ask something. I'm curious, like during or now that you are, I guess, grad students, what are, I guess, skills or habits or things you wish you were involved with as an undergrad that you think would have prepared you well for grad school, or things that you did do in your undergrad that prepared you well for academia?
Sort of mentioned this earlier, but certainly time management and self-management, being able to set goals, follow through on goals, not rely on someone else to program every single hour of your day or tell you exactly the steps that need to be done. There's nothing wrong with starting grad school not knowing how to do that. And you certainly will have the support that you need to learn that sort of thing. But I do think that that's a big part of being successful, regardless of how smart you are or how good you are at something. Just being able to manage your time around it, I think, is important. And then, I'm sure that it's a common thing to say, but I think involvement in student organizations is certainly helpful. If nothing else, just kind of teaching you how to be part of a team that's trying to accomplish something together. I think that's kind of something you get. I mean, it's nothing about research to me is like a group project, like an assigned group project. It's much more like a student organization, a team of people working together to break up the work and accomplish some common goal.
One thing I think it's important when you're choosing an activity or an organization or a group, make sure you actually like it. Because I have a lot of students, there's a lot of pre-meds, for instance, in biomedical engineering, and they think that they should belong to this group or that group. And yeah, the people that you meet and the people that you work with in your student organizations kind of become your network. And those are the groups and the people and the activities that lead you through your career to the next thing. And so if you choose something because you should and not because you like it, then the next thing is something that you should do and not necessarily because you like it. So make sure you like it. I get asked, oh, should I have a comp sci minor? Should I have a math minor? I'm like, well, only if you love it, because you don't want to make too many of your choices if you can help it, just because you've been told or you feel like you're supposed to. Because those do lead to the next thing. And there's lots and lots of things. There's no wrong choices. Just make sure you like it.
Yeah, one thing that I did in undergrad that I think that helped me, besides, doing research in undergrad, was I used to not know how to talk to people. If you told me back when I was a freshman, oh, you just walk into that professor's office, ask them a question, I had been like, no, thank you. Never, they will never see my face. I'm never coming back. But I had a good professor that was like, no, you really need to go talk to this person. And then he would send me to talk to someone else, sort of to get over my fear of just interaction in general. And I TA'd in undergrad, so that really helped my communication skills. I signed up to give like the department tours for visiting students, and like that really helped. And I think one of my strongest qualities as a grad student is I am good at communicating what's going on in my research and also like the problems I'm running into. And I'm far more willing to go to a professor and be like, hey, I'm stuck on this, or like, this is what I've tried, it's not working. So I think that's something that's been super helpful. And also just like taking care of my mental health, because like I did that throughout undergrad, and so I do it now. And I think that's been really helpful. So yeah.
That was all wonderful answers. Patricia, going back to what you were saying about just doing like joining the orgs you like or taking on a minor, for example, that you like, how do you, as like an undergrad who's like even me personally, unsure about which route I want to take, there's just a wide array of options. Do I want to do industry? Do I want to do research? How do you start understanding what you truly like?
Right. Well, and that's a really good question, because there's, you've probably been told, you guys are all very capable people, and you've been told all your life, you can do anything you want. You are so good. You just, all the paths, they're open to you. You're like, can you just narrow it down a little bit for you? Because it's hard, right? It's hard to choose. And so what I think works, well, a place to start, is just to kind of start with what's in front of you now, what looks best to you now. And try not to second guess yourself too much. I mean, you want to have an end in mind. Of course, you want to have some general goals, but you also, I think, want to say, you know what, where I am right now, I can be part of this group, but this is the amount of time I have. This is the kind of energy I want to put into it. These are the kind of people I want to be like one day. These are the kind of people I like to hang around. I feel like spending an hour or two with these folks would be really interesting and fun, and it wouldn't feel like work at all. It would be like play, so but try not to fret too much about, am I choosing the right thing? Because I think that for one thing, you can always change your mind, and for another thing, the thing that makes sense to do right now will lead to the next thing that makes sense to do right now. And try not to have that fear of missing out, that really, oh, I should have been in this other group instead, but it is hard.
Does anyone have anything else to add to that? Megan or John B? Are there any other questions from the audience members?
It's a quick question. How do you determine whether research is like the right path for you? Because like you could be interested in a lot of different things, but like how did you know that research was or doing a PhD or going to grad school was right for you?
I think one thing to remember is you can always, if you start out in academia, you can always decide to go back to industry. Likewise, if you go to industry, you can always choose to come back to academia. I think like the three of us have, run the gamut on like those experiences. As for like, how do I know this is right for me? At the end of the day, I don't, right? Like, in all honesty, in 4 or 5 years, I could decide I never want to do research ever again. And like, that's terrifying because it's like, okay, what am I just spending now? But for me, I'm okay with spending this time gaining this skill set and getting, the degree that I'm working towards. And I'm open to whatever I can do after that. And so for me, it's just, I want to be able to open this door, and getting a PhD is going to open this like professor door. And whether I choose to take it, that is yet to be seen. And that's okay, because like the other thing is, especially in undergrad, early grad school, like you're so young and you don't realize it, because I feel like when you graduate, you're like, oh God, I have to pick what I want to do for the rest of my life now. And that's just not how life works, apparently. Like, I'm 23, but I've been told that that's not what life is like. So, yeah.
Yeah,